Female desire is a complete puzzle if you don't know where to put the right pieces. In this video, I'll give you a complete blueprint to unlock female desire completely free. You just need to stay until the end and you'll be a man with power and knowledge few possess. Understand, you were trained to please, not to understand. To listen to what she says, ignoring what her body communicates. You live in a social theater where women repeat that they want security, stability, a caring man, and you believe them. But when the world darkens, when no one is looking, when instinct speaks louder than logic, another type of man dominates your thoughts. And that's where dissonance arises. The public version of female desire and its secret counterpart clash. Those who don't understand this fracture are condemned to always be the understanding friend, the predictable cutie, the safe, invisible one. This disconnect between what a woman says she wants and what truly excites her isn't just a social detail. It's a hidden code, an evolutionary mechanism masked by centuries of moral repression, romantic narratives, and ideological discourses. The truth? Female desire is dark, contradictory, and often antisocial. It doesn't operate by logic or coherence. It operates by emotional impact. And if you want to decipher it, you'll need to throw away the manual you were given as a child. In ancient Greece, Plato warned, "Everything beautiful attracts us through the soul, but everything chaotic captures us through desire." This is the first point that needs to be absorbed. Female desire is not programmed for well-being, but for tension. For controlled danger. For the unpredictable that fascinates. A woman desires what takes her off center. Not what comforts her, but what destabilizes her emotionally, without ever losing control of the situation. A living paradox, and yet completely predictable, once you understand the blueprint. Civilization has made a desperate effort to contain this feminine impulse with social conventions, religion, repression, and moralism. But desire does not submit to reason. It hides, adapts, and manifests itself in veiled forms. Monogamy, for example, is not a natural expression of female desire, but rather an attempt to control it. And when you look at the data, it becomes clear. Women in stable relationships tend to fantasize more than men, consume more erotic literature, initiate more divorces, and in anonymous surveys express twice as much desire for multiple partners as they publicly admit. This isn't opinion. It's psychobiology. It's naked sociology. And that's where the blueprint begins. The lie peddled by modern culture, that men and women desire in the same way, just at different times, is a dangerous fantasy. Women, biologically, are selective, but psychologically, they are driven by factors that transcend appearance or status. What they want is influence, symbolic dominance, and a touch of the abyss. What they need to feel is that you could hurt them but choose not to. This isn't about violence, but about emotional power. The difference between being able to have and needing to have. The man they truly desire isn't the most secure, he's the most enigmatic. The one they can't predict. You were taught to be direct, to demonstrate intentions, to be clear, but her desire is born in the vacuum of ambiguity. Clarity places you in the category of the predictable. Ambiguity places you in the realm of the memorable. She may not understand why she thinks about you at night, but she does. And that's enough. The lie of female desire as something delicate, romantic, and pure was created to protect the social order, not to reflect human nature. In The Second Sex, Simone de Beauvoir pointed out that women were conditioned from an early age to deny their active sexuality, to hide their desire. But desire doesn't die. It recalibrates. It becomes fantasy. And fantasy, when repressed, intensifies. That's why she reads stories about domineering billionaires, immortal vampires, and charming villains. Because in them, desire can be lived without guilt, without witnesses. She projects what she cannot live. And you keep trying to convince her that you're a good catch. But female desire isn't for sale. It ignites, it flares, and it justifies itself later. The explanation comes after the impact. She constructs logic to understand what she's already felt. And if you try to convince her rationally, you're behind the game. Observe the patterns. The man she claims to love and the man she dreams of are often opposites. One represents the pillar, the other represents the fire. One sustains, the other consumes. One builds, the other excites. And that's why so many couples are emotionally lukewarm. Desire has been tamed, controlled, silenced, but never eliminated. Do you want to be the architect of her emotion? then stop following what she verbalizes. Start reading what she reacts to. Female desire responds to tension, emotional scarcity, unpredictability, and above all, to symbolism. A man may not be wealthy, but if he carries symbols of power, social leadership, bodily dominance, narrative magnetism, she notices. Her desire responds to meaning, not status itself. And if you don't understand the symbolic value of your every gesture, you're not playing, you're being played. This is the fatal lie that separates the forgettable from the unforgettable. And that's why so many good options, men are systematically rejected. They don't trigger desire, they don't create contrast, they don't provoke dissonance. They're too legible, they're too linear. And the female brain doesn't want the obvious, it wants what forces it to imagine, to fill in the gaps, to piece together the puzzle. That's why the more you try to please, the more distant she becomes. The more you give in, the more you disappear. Desire isn't generated by constant presence, but by strategic absence. It's doubt that holds attention. It's mystery that keeps the connection alive. A man who knows this doesn't need to chase, he simply positions himself as the one who can be lost. And her mind does the rest. We then arrive at the most uncomfortable point. Female desire is not fair. It doesn't choose based on what is right or reciprocal. It chooses based on emotional impact, on the internal story she lives when she's around you. If you represent a storyline that challenges the linearity of her life, you become magnetic. If you activate mental zones she doesn't explore with anyone else, you become an obsession. If you raise more questions than answers, you become unforgettable. Female desire has never been a level playing field. It has always been a field of selection. And selection demands contrast. You won't be chosen if you're like everyone else. You'll be ignored even if you're perfect. Because perfection doesn't breed desire. Perfection breeds comfort. And desire, as we've already understood, doesn't live in comfort. It lives on the margins, on the threshold, in what borders on danger but doesn't cross it. And that's where the masters of seduction live, on the border between the predictable and the impossible. If you want to understand female desire, you must first accept the chaos that composes it. Accept that there is no justice in this game, only emotional reading. And this reading is done in the details. In the look that lasts half a second too long, in the pause before responding, in the absence that leaves room for imagination. Desire is born in the mind and settles in the body. But the body merely follows the script the brain has allowed itself to write. What it feels always comes before what it understands. And if this all seems confusing, perfect. Because right now you're feeling what most men feel when they try to understand female desire using logic. Logic doesn't work here. What matters is understanding the codes, the symbols, the archetypes, and the unspoken emotions. That's why the most dangerous men aren't the richest or the most handsome. They're the ones who master perception. They're the ones who know how to disappear at the right moment. They're the ones who understand that silence also seduces. I'll now explain to you the complete architecture of female desire in its essence. Well, first you need to understand this. Female desire isn't a sudden explosion. It's a silent but precise construction. If in the first chapter we revealed the illusion sold about it, now we delve into the anatomy of this force. The invisible foundations that build, layer by layer, the kind of attraction that transcends logic and sticks like an addiction. A woman doesn't just desire a man. She desires what he represents, what he symbolizes, and even more, what she feels in his presence. This is the secret that almost no one has the courage to face, and even less the courage to use. If you think presence is being present, you haven't understood anything yet. True presence is when your absence weighs heavily. It's when your memory leaves more of a mark than your physical presence. It's when the emotional impact you caused reverberates in her thoughts, even without a word exchanged. This presence is built not by insistence, but by symbolic construction. And everything symbolic is powerful, because it installs itself directly in the unconscious. Let's break this down. At the root of female desire is a pattern repeated across cultures and eras. The figure of the man she doesn't fully control. This man could be a tribal leader, a marginal poet, a Roman general, a tortured artist, or even a modern CEO. The archetype is the same. He's the one who defies structure, who imposes rhythm on the environment without needing to dominate it with brute force, who is admired by other men but doesn't bow to the need to please. This man carries an aura of scarcity, emotional, attitudinal, and narrative. He's not easily accessed, nor fully deciphered. Why does this matter? Because the female brain seeks signals of hidden social value. She reads more than she listens. She analyzes more than she responds. She senses whether you need her attention or whether you offer yours as a rare gift. And this is where most women go wrong. They give too much, explain too much, try too hard. And visible attempt is the death of tension. The undercover alpha archetype is the most powerful in this game. He doesn't need to raise his voice, flaunt his conquests, or prove his worth. Because he masters the symbol. He transforms his body language into narrative, his silence into tension, his absence into presence. A woman senses there's something about him she can't decipher, and it's this gap that holds her captive. Seduction isn't in what you show, but in what you let slip. Like a well-written movie script, you never reveal everything at once. In the series Peaky Blinders, Thomas Shelby rarely smiles. He barely speaks. But every gesture carries weight. Every silence has density. He doesn't rush. He doesn't react emotionally. He observes, measures, and acts with lethal precision. The result? He reads as unpredictable, dangerous, and mysterious. 3 biological attention triggers for the female brain. This isn't acting. It's presence engineering. And you don't have to be an English gangster to evoke this effect. You need to understand the elements that make it up. First, emotional control. A man who displays emotional urgency loses power. A man who maintains his pace in the face of tension is perceived as dominant, and this dominance isn't physical, but emotional. Second, verbal scarcity. Men who talk too much explain themselves too much. Men who speak little, but with intention, are perceived as focused. Third, ambiguity. Female desire requires doubt. If she's certain she has you, the game is over. But if she feels she's being led, even without knowing how, she dives deeper. This is the key point. Women surrender to the process, not the destination. The path to the man is what defines the value of the connection. Access that's too easy, too predictable, shatters the fantasy. And female desire is built on fantasy. This is why the most attractive men historically haven't been the most straightforward, but the most narrative. Don Draper, from the series Mad Men, is married, a cheater, an alcoholic, but he's desired. Why? Because he carries a symbolic presence. Because he represents symbolic power. He is the mystery that can never be explained. The mistake she knows will hurt but desires anyway. A woman doesn't desire perfection. She desires complexity. The predictable man offers peace. The complex man offers passion. And passion is born when her brain enters emotional dissonance. When the body desires, but the mind hesitates. When logic screams, be careful, but instinct whispers, just one more time. This dissonance is what turns a flirtation into an obsession. The French philosopher Jacques Lacan said, "Desire is the desire of the other." What did he mean by this? That human beings only desire what they perceive as desired. In the case of women, this is amplified. A woman reacts emotionally to a man who knows how to generate scant validation, one who offers crumbs of attention loaded with meaning. A look, a provocation, a calculated disappearance. Scarcity isn't absence, it's perception management. She doesn't feel ignored. She feels she needs to deserve more from you. And this activates a powerful internal cycle, that of emotional obsession. This is where the principle of intermittent validation comes in, a powerful technique based on addictive behavior. Imagine a casino. It doesn't always give you the prize, but it rewards you randomly. This is addictive. The brain doesn't perceive predictable patterns as exciting, but when emotional rewards come sporadically, addiction sets in. And this is exactly what great seducers do without realizing it. They create unpredictable emotional peaks, an unexpected compliment, a sudden withdrawal, a display of interest that doesn't repeat itself the next day. Result? She thinks about him constantly, trying to figure out where the key to the safe is. Do you still believe that physical beauty is the greatest factor in attraction? Think again. How many women have you seen rejecting handsome, rich, available men? And how many have you seen emotionally trapped by average, yet unpredictable, charismatic, or even destructive men? This is biology plus social psychology. Beauty attracts attention. The narrative holds desire. And if you don't have a narrative, you're disposable. So, what narrative do you represent? The forbidden mentor, the emotional challenge, the enchanting mystery, the solitary artist, the silent conqueror. Understand, you don't have to be them all. You have to be an archetype and master it to the point of becoming unforgettable. Because female desire is anchored in characters, not people. In symbols, not facts. That's why a woman can spend years obsessed with a man she's had a single date with. He wasn't just a person. He was a script. And when you're a script, you never leave her mind. This is also why the nice guy fails. He has no character. He's too literal, too obvious, too transparent. Female desire is a poetic language. When you deliver too much prose, she closes the book. But when you insinuate, when you play with emotional metaphors, she reads more, wants more, needs more. The game isn't about being available, it's about being deciphered. She doesn't want to know everything about you, she wants to discover. And every discovery requires resistance. This is the next point, symbolic resistance. You don't have to say no. You need to make her feel that not everything is available, that your attention has criteria, that your validation has filters. This communicates inner value. A man who surrenders to every smile communicates hunger. A man who chooses and demonstrates subtle criteria communicates abundance, and abundance attracts. This is where many fail when trying to appear detached. They feign coldness but lack the emotional structure to sustain silence. She feels it. She senses the performance. True power lies in the authenticity of your scarcity. You need to be someone who was already sufficient before she arrived, who already has a purpose, who isn't emotionally available to just anyone, but who chooses to open up when something extraordinary happens. The woman who feels she's been chosen, not conquered, enters a state of emotional elevation. She feels she's won a rare prize, and that prize is you. This is how you build the architecture of attraction. Quiet presence, emotional control, narrative ambiguity, strategic scarcity, and consistent symbolism. You don't have to be the most beautiful, but you do need to be the most intriguing. You don't have to be the strongest, but you do need to be the rarest. Because desire isn't about having, it's about seeking. It's not about stability. It's about movement. The desired man isn't the one who's available. He's the one in transition, on the rise, in motion. And she wants to be the momentary stopping point on that journey. She wants to feel like she's interrupted something powerful. You become irresistible when your absence weighs more heavily than the presence of others, when the silence you leave echoes louder than the words of your competitors, when the symbol you represent is stronger than the logic it tries to apply. Because at that point, the game has already been won. Not by words, but by emotional structure, by invisible architecture, by symbolic presence. Now I'm going to give you the deepest access code to the feminine subconscious. Get into the flow with me. She's seen you. She's heard you. She's laughed at your jokes. She's heard sweet words, promises, well-rehearsed phrases. She's received flowers, likes, concerned messages. And still, nothing. Because you've never accessed the point that truly matters, the unconscious. The place where desire is born before any rational justification. Where chemistry builds without her realizing it. Where you enter and never leave. If the first two chapters showed the terrain and architecture of female desire, now we open the door to the most restricted room of this temple. The access code. What men mistake for charm or beauty, but which is actually behavioral engineering combined with emotional reading. Because female desire is not awakened by logic, but by controlled dissonances that act directly on her limbic system. The center of raw, primitive, nonverbal emotion. It is in this space that the game is won. Understand, when a woman starts justifying why she thinks about you all the time, it's already too late. She's no longer deciding whether she wants you. She's trying to understand why she already does. The female unconscious operates with three key elements: emotional tension, unpredictable validation, and symbolism of dominance. And each of these is a lever that, when pulled precisely, disarms resistance, dissolves defenses, and installs you in the most intimate space of her psyche. Let's go to the first, emotional tension. This tension is the heart of desire. It arises from the contrast between what she feels and what she understands, from the imbalance between what you show and what she would like to understand, from the interplay between presence and the threat of absence. A classic mistake men make is to soften their emotions too much. being calm, stable, gentle. This turns you into comfort, but not desire. Desire needs emotional peaks, energetic variations, pauses and accelerations. When you subtly provoke her, when you generate doubt without hostility, when you pull away at the peak of the interaction, you create tension. And where there is tension, there is memory. And where there is memory, addiction is born. This tension, however, can't be stupid. It can't be a fight nor a forced game. It needs to be elegant. You create tension with precise silences, with glances that last a second longer than socially acceptable, with non-sexual touches placed at just the right moment. A light touch on the forearm while saying something important. A compliment that doesn't come when she's expecting it, but when she least expects it. A "not today" said with an enigmatic smile. Each of these actions inserts micro-fragments of tension that her subconscious registers as emotional unpredictability. And unpredictability activates the dopaminergic system, the same brain circuit used by addictions exactly. Seduction, when done well, is biochemistry. You're not just charming, you're reprogramming. Now the second pillar, unpredictable validation. The modern woman is accustomed to being flattered. The world delivers constant validation, likes, messages, glances. What is scarce becomes valuable. What is predictable becomes noise. When you offer validation intermittently, you break the mold. You become different, not because you try, but because you control your emotional frequency. A compliment every 3 interactions. A compliment cut short with a light tease. A message after a long silence. This generates anticipation, expectation, and unfulfilled expectation generates constant attention. But be careful, this isn't cold manipulation. This is art, and all art works with rhythm, contrast, and surrender. You can't give everything at once. You can't reveal yourself completely. A woman needs to feel that every crumb of attention you offer is a conquest, that she's slowly conquering parts of you. This engages her. This captivates her. This turns her into a player. And when she feels part of the game, she invests. And when she invests, she clings. And when she clings, desire turns into need. Here comes the third point. Symbolism of dominance. And no, this has nothing to do with aggression. Dominance is when your presence shapes her behavior. When she feels she needs to be at your pace. When you dictate the mood of the interaction. When you have emotional control of the situation. This happens when you take up space with your body, but without tension. When you speak slowly and wait for her to respond. When you change the subject without asking permission. When you leave the conversation first. When you demonstrate that, even if you're interested, you're willing to lose her. This symbolism conveys inner power. Not the power to control others, but the power to not be controlled. That's why words aren't enough. And this is where most people fail. Because they still try to convince her with arguments. They still say, "I'm different, I'm trustworthy, I'm the guy who will treat you well." But she doesn't want to be treated well. She wants to be felt, she wants to be impacted, she wants to be transformed. And this doesn't come from the right words, it comes from the right behavior. When you treat her well, but don't idolize her. When you care, but don't give in. When you challenge her, but without disrespect. When you truly see her, but don't bow to what she projects. And then the ultimate paradox arises. A woman wants to be conquered, but doesn't want you to try to conquer her. She wants to feel it was inevitable. That what happened between you wasn't due to insistence, but due to a mutual attraction so strong that you both surrendered. This only happens when you position yourself as someone who has options, but chooses one. When you don't force, don't beg, don't demand, but also don't hold back. You don't ask, you provoke, you don't run, you attract. And when she feels this viscerally, it doesn't matter how many other men she sees, none of them will be in the same symbolic realm as you. Because at that point, you stopped being a man and became a metaphor. You became a symbol. You became a place inside her, a place where she felt alive, desired, curious, instigated. And that place, my friend, no one can erase. Because the unconscious records everything that stirred the nervous system, everything that deviated from the norm, everything that activated a story she didn't even know she wanted to live. And when that happens, you no longer need to be present. Desire works for you. And this is where we end this journey, but not with an answer. Because seduction isn't about having all the answers. It's about being the question she can't stop asking, the enigma she wants to decipher. the exclamation point she feels in her body, even when her mind denies it. You felt it. You were there, in the room, you did what you were told. You were polite, attentive, available, but nothing. She didn't see you, because you didn't understand the brutal truth. The world doesn't reward the good man. It rewards the unforgettable man. Female desire doesn't respond to logic. It reacts to symbolic presence, to emotional tension, to the silent narrative of a man who doesn't need to prove anything because he carries the invisible code. The same code that the audiobook The Forbidden Manual reveals without asking permission. What we explored in the previous chapters, the archetypes, the ambiguity, the tension, the emotional mastery, is condensed into this psychological weapon in audiobook format. But be careful, it's not about ready-made phrases or cheap games. It's about behavioral engineering that rewrites your way of existing socially, of being seen, of being remembered, of being desired. While you continue trying to win over women with flowers and smiles, there are other men using silence, ambiguity, and emotional scarcity as lethal weapons of influence. They're no longer pretty, they're more symbolic. They don't ask, they tease, they don't chase, they draw attention and capture desire. If you've made it this far, you understand. You no longer need to compete for affection. You need to become the trigger she can't ignore.